in John, you do have these sections that stretch chapter after chapter after chapter. They're weaving together. So, for example, the incident in John 5 where Jesus heals the lame man, and then they go after Jesus because he's the one that kind of told the guy to carry his mat on the Sabbath. Jesus says, no, no, no. The Father's working. My Father's working till now. I'm working. And then they obviously pursue that greater charge. You've made yourself equal with God. That's um, that's all happening in the spring. That's Passover. And you trace that through to the end of the chapter, into chapter 6, where it's pre-Passover really, because chapter 6 is where Passover is mentioned. And Jesus is back up in Galilee. You go through chapter 6 and feeding the 5,000 and the walking on water just kind of inserted within that story. And then you come to chapter 7 and it's the Feast of Tabernacles. That's 6 months later. And Jesus goes to Jerusalem, and immediately the conversation is talking about the guy that was healed in John 5. So it's the same issue that's lingering, that carries right the way through 7, through 8, and so that at the end of 8, they pick up stones to stone him. That's 6, 7 months after the initial offense. And then you come to chapter 10, he's back in Jerusalem, Feast of Dedication, which is sort of winter, Christmas time. Not that they would see it that way. And you come through into John 11, the raising of Lazarus, which must be somewhere around February of the year that Jesus was crucified. And it's all flowing through. And so by the time you get to the Passion Week and the final section of John and all that happens there, this has been brewing since chapter 5. This has been brewing, as far as calendar is concerned, for over 12 months. And so how do you preach that? I mean, how do you effectively and faithfully communicate that? Well, some obvious ideas are, preach sequentially, preach that section as a series so that people are spending time in it. But then the challenge is, how do you avoid it becoming atomized, where each message stands completely on its own? But equally, it's hard as a preacher because some people may have missed last week, and so you can't refer to it all the time. So I think it does push us in our preaching to develop a real skill in summary, and say this is what we've seen, and to selectively summarize, so that by the time you come to, say, chapter 8, you're probably not going to talk much about Galilee in chapter 6, but you do need to touch down on what happened in chapter 5. And so it's that kind of selective summary at the start of messages in a sequence, in a series. And then if you can come up with ways to get people really chewing on that text, maybe in life groups, home groups or something, where they're working their way through passages or something like that, you just encourage people to read it or read the section. It's not a simple solution, but I think there's a real richness to the length of the narratives, and that's talking big kind of multi-narratives. When you're talking an individual narrative, you've got the same challenge. How do you create kind of awareness of themes in one section that are then going to kind of make sense later on in the same message? So it does take some real crafting to preach something that sounds as simple as John, but is as effective as John.